Hey guys, welcome to episode 2 of Dween Tech. I never actually thought I would make it this far. So many people to thank. My mom, Jesus Gonzalez, God Peterson, Ken, Blanca, Chun-Li, Reptile, George Bush, my Skittles guy, not the president. Today we'll be talking about what I believe to be the best portable handheld emulator device. I'll touch on why I'm not including tablets or computers in this review, but I won't spend much time on it. The contenders when it comes to portable handheld emulation devices are as follows, and I'm going to have to look at my list here because there's quite a few of them actually. I'm going to go over the PSP, the PSP Vita or the PlayStation Vita, the Game Boy Advance, all incarnations, the 3DS, the Nintendo 3DS, the Nintendo DS, and the Nvidia Shield handheld. Not the Shield tablet, but the Nvidia Shield handheld, the one with the controller and screen built in. I'll show you a picture of it. The others are smartphones and third-party Chinese dedicated emulation devices. If I forgot any that you think I should have included, just mention them in the comments below. So without further ado, get it? Poop. YouTube attention spans are short, and I don't want to lose any more viewers than I already. Psych! I'm still here. First up, I'll talk about Chinese devices. They're not all bad, but it's really hit or miss when it comes to quality and controls and, hardware capability. And by control, I'm gonna state right here, right now on my channel, that what constitutes good controls, for me at least, is the Hadouken test. Hadouken! If I can't throw a decent Hadouken in Street Fighter easily, then it fails my controls test. I like Street Fighter, I've been playing for over 20 years, so throwing a Hadouken should come naturally and easily if the controls are good on any said device. Down, forward, punch. The other potential drawback to these Chinese or third-party emulator-specific devices are the actual hardware capability. That being said, any new device these days can handle 8-bit emulation and below easily. So things like the NES and the Game Boy, that stuff's going to be really easy to handle, and anything's going to be able to run that stuff smoothly. What starts to separate the men from the boys, however, is 16-bit emulation. Again, with third-party handheld devices, it's hit or miss. Lag and frame dropping is rampant. So my best advice is, if you're looking at a third-party emulation device, is to do your homework and just plain old forget about 32-bit emulation. Like PlayStation and up, it's just not happening on little third-party devices. 32-bit emulation is hard for any device to do. Next up, we'll be talking about hacked mainstream portables. Things like the Game Boy Advance and the PSP and the Vita and whatnot. That's what we'll be talking about here. And we'll start with the Game Boy Advanced. Now, to get a Game Boy Advance to run emulators, you're gonna need a flash card, and I'm not gonna tell you where to buy those. But it rhymes with China. And with the Game Boy Advance, again, forget about 16-bit emulation. The hardware just is not powerful enough to emulate even 16-bit. You're limited to 8-bit and below with a Game Boy Advance. Although, ROMs, Game Boy Advance ROMs will still run perfectly, duh, because that's the hardware it's designed for. And again, don't ask me how to get ROMs. It's legal gray area at best, and I am not going to help anybody find out how to get ROMs. No joke here. I'm super serial. I have a Game Boy Micro, and hopefully I'll include it here in this video. Can't find it. I do actually really like it, as far as emulation is concerned. It's perfect for keeping in your pocket, and it's just right there ready to go anytime you want for any 8-bit games or any Game Boy Advance games, and the controls are awesome. Throwing a Hadouken is so easy on a Game Boy Micro. Now moving on to the Nintendo DS, slightly more powerful hardware. A lot more powerful. As far as the DS as an emulator, it runs the same way as a Game Boy Advance does. You have to use flash carts. Even the same flash cart that you use in the GBA. You just put that in the NDS, the Nintendo DS Game Boy Advanced slot, if you have a DS that has an advanced slot, like an NDS Lite. And again, since you're basically using the Game Boy Advance part of the Nintendo DS, forget about 16-bit emulation. It's not happening. It's not happening smoothly anyways. That being said, yeah, GBA ROMs still work perfectly, and Nintendo DS ROMs work perfectly, because that's the hardware it's designed, those ROMs are designed to use. Next up is the Nintendo 3DS. As far as emulation goes, it's the same as the Nintendo DS. 3DS hasn't had a viable hack yet to utilize the extra horsepower under the hood. So in regards to emulation hardware, it's still basically using the Nintendo DS part of the 3DS hardware. So again, you're limited to using a Nintendo DS or Game Boy. You can't use a Game Boy Advance card, but you're using a Nintendo DS flash card for it. The emulation community is, however, sort of on the edge of our seat waiting for the 3DS to be compromised. Utilizing the hardware and extra features of the 3DS should make 16-bit emulation perfect. It might even be able to do some 32-bit emulation, possibly even 64-bit like Nintendo 64. But on that note, the Nintendo shop is wonderful, and all the stuff in there is reasonably priced as far as, classic games are concerned. I haven't much cared that the 3DS isn't hacked yet because the eShop is so good to use, and classic games are readily available and instantly available for download. Take note, Sony. Speaking of Sony, up next is the PSP and the Vita. Even the PSP with custom firmware struggles with 16-bit emulation, but a ton of 16-bit titles do work perfectly, even at 60 frames per second. Forget about a Super Nintendo game using the FX chip. Star Fox and Yoshi's Island are going to be, in my opinion, playable. Donkey Kong Country, however, and like Killer Instinct, Rare titles by the developer Rare, they are playable if you're willing to accept about 30 to 45 frames per second. And then again, you can turn on frame skipping and make it even more playable at the cost of smoothness. That being said, Super Nintendo games that have been ported to GBA titles run perfectly, like Yoshi's Island on Game Boy Advanced, perfect. Donkey Kong Country on Game Boy Advanced, perfect. They run perfectly on the PSP. It is great. The PSP also plays PSP ISOs and ROMs perfectly. Duh, because they're actually being played on the PSP itself. Even PlayStation, I want to say PlayStation 1, but the original PlayStation, 32-bit PlayStation titles, a lot of those work on PSP as well. Don't even ask about PS2. In fact, don't ask about PS2 on any handheld device. PlayStation 2 emulation requires a PC, and even at that, even in 2015, a rather robust PS. In fact, don't even ask about PlayStation 2 emulation on any sort of handheld device. PS2 emulation, even in 2015, requires a PC, and at that, again, even in 2015, a rather robust PC. Now on to PSP controls. The controls are great. Hadoukens are super easy. And the best part about PSP is, for all its power and all its controls and all its quality and all it can do, you can pick one up used for well under $100. Less than those third-party and Chinese devices. So the PSP does everything a third-party device does, only better and with better controls. Plus you can play PSP games on it, and movies and audio files and anything else you want, any other media basically. Plus it arguably fits in your pocket. It'll definitely fit in your backpack or a purse or a laptop bag. So far the PSP is looking like a strong choice to me. And that brings us to the PS Vita. The Vita hasn't been hacked yet, viably, to utilize all its extra horsepower and features. Once it's hacked, fully, I'm buying one. I'm gonna repeat that. I'm buying a PS Vita once it's hacked. No question. If the PS Vita is ever hacked fully, it will be the holy grail of portable emulation. However, the PSP part of the PS Vita is hacked. So it can run any emulators that the PSP can run. It's only using PSP hardware. So you can kind of think about it this way, and I may be wrong, this is just my opinion on it. It'd be like running a Super Nintendo emulator in a PSP emulator on a Vita. Emuception. In the process to hack a Vita to utilize the PSP emulation is so involved, I haven't even bothered being interested in doing it, let alone spending, $200 or so on a Vita. If all the Vita can do is do what a PSP can, there's no point. I already have a PSP, and you can get a PSP for like $50. So the Vita sits in kind of a funny position. It's bad as an emulation device. I'd put it close to the bottom with third-party Chinese emulators. But once it's fully hacked, it will instantly go from almost worst to darn near the top, if not the top. It'll go from almost worst to almost the best. Not even on the chart, to top of the chart. Instantly. So now, that brings us to smartphones. Current smartphones like Apple's iPhone or Android's, anything running Android, they can all do 16-bit easily. I say modern devices. A cell phone a few years old, probably not. Some can even do a good job with 64-bit, and even PSP ROMs. For instance, I have a Galaxy Note 3. It's not even a Note 4, it's a Note 3. And it's just perfect for emulation. 16-bit doesn't skip a beat. It runs at full 1080 and at 60 frames per second. Even Star Fox, even Yoshi's Island, it's all perfect. And on that note, while iPhones can run emulators, it requires jailbreaking and all sorts of backdoor tomfoolery to get working. You can't just download an emulator from the App Store and run Game Boys. You can't just download an emulator from the App Store and run an emulator. Unless I'm wrong. I don't have an Apple. I haven't had an Apple device in a while. Maybe you can from the App Store. Maybe? I thought you needed to jailbreak it first and get Cydia and download stuff through there first. Again, just go in the comments below. Discuss. Even then, the Apple hardware might not be able to emulate even 16-bit very effectively. 16-bit emulation requires a fairly beefy mobile processor to be able to do efficiently. So your best bet with emulating on your phone is an Android device using a Snapdragon or Nvidia chipset. Also, since Android is open source, you don't have to root or jailbreak or hack your phone in any way, shape, or form to start emulating immediately. You just download the emulator from the Play Store and find ROMs in some way. You just find the emulator on the Play Store and you're up and running instantly. It's super easy. However, and this is a huge 2 weeks constipated however, using touchscreen controls to play emulators is god awful. It is an abomination unto the emulator lords. Puke-worthy. Holy crap, is it bad. I'd rather try playing a PS2 game on a hacked Game Boy. It is seriously terrible. I hate touchscreen controls. And that's the catch. To play with your cell phone, you're gonna need an external controller, either USB or Bluetooth. And the same goes for emulating with a tablet, since a tablet is basically just a giant cell phone. See? I told you I was going to touch on tablets. I'm so stupid. Now, once you're using your phone with an external controller, especially a controller that has a built-in phone cradle, it is almost perfect. It was meant to be, and it was a match made in heaven. Almost. Arguably, the best external controller for your smartphone is a Moga controller from a company called Moga, M-O-G-A. I'll put a link down in the description. It has a built-in phone cradle, and some of the models, the Pro model I believe, has a built-in battery pack. I mean, obviously you need a battery to power the Bluetooth part of the phone, but the battery pack is huge enough so that you can actually charge your phone while you're playing a game. It's like an external battery pack for your phone. The best part of the Moga controller is it's the best controller out there, arguably arguably, Bluetooth, you know, with the cradle for your phone, it's arguably the best. And it works almost flawlessly. A big asterisk by that almost. I say almost because while the Moga controller is 99.9999999% perfect overall in every single way, that last little 0.0000001% is the killer, for me at least. It fails the Hadouken test. Throwing a Hadouken with the Moga is impossible with either the analog stick or the D-pad. The D-pad is pure, unadulterated garbage, and it's such a shame because the rest of the controller is so perfect. But it's completely worthless for fighting games or platformers, which eliminates like half the games available today. But for a first-person shooter, when all you're using is the analog stick and maybe the D-pad to select weapons, great, perfect. I'm not really that into first-person shooters. I like them, I have fun playing them with my friends, but a 360 no-scope ain't happening for me. I can't even respawn and stay alive for more than 2 seconds at a time. Saying all that, if Moga's next incarnation fixes that D-pad issue, I'm sold. I'm so sold that I would say a Moga with a good D-pad and a cell phone is the perfect portable emulation solution. And I mean perfect. Perfect! You'd already have your phone in your pocket, so you wouldn't have to buy anything else, and all you would need to do is carry one of Moga's smaller controllers around in your pocket, or in your backpack, or your laptop bag, or your purse. Plus, it would arguably make the Nvidia Shield irrelevant. What a masterful segue into the Nvidia Shield Portable. It's almost like I planned it that way and could write my script any way I wanted to. I freaking love my Nvidia Shield Portable. It's got an Nvidia Tegra 4 chip inside there, which makes it, even in 2015, one of the most powerful Android devices you can buy today. Seriously, in benchmarking, it's up there, even with, in the top, I think it's in the top 10. It's definitely in the top 10, even with the latest phones released. The Note 4, which is like at the very top, or maybe second, barely. The Shield is just a few notches below that, actually. There is virtually nothing the Shield cannot emulate. 64-bit, 32-bit, 16-bit, don't even question 16-bit, or anything below. It's perfect. It's so powerful, it emulates virtually everything perfectly. It even emulates PSP. A lot of the games emulate perfectly. Like Burnout, for instance. Burnout Revenge or Burnout Dominator. What are the two for PSP? The two Burnout games on PSP, perfect. And a lot of other games are perfect. The only game I've come across so far, really, that doesn't emulate perfectly, and by emulate perfectly, I mean it's actually pretty awful, unplayable, are the God of War titles. They run at like 8 frames per second. It's ridiculous. But as far as emulating those games, I don't think it's really an issue of hardware. It's just an issue of the people who make the emulators for PSP need to make some patches for those games to run smoothly. And the controls. Oh my gosh. The controls are just butter. It's like having a 360 controller and a PS3 controller. It's kind of mixed into one, and it's perfect. For my hands, at least, it's perfect. And I have pretty normal-sized hands for a guy who's 6'1". The rest of the fit and finish is definitely top tier. And fellow audiophiles, the DAC and headphone amp in this thing are the best I've heard on any portable device I have ever listened to. It is great. So good. So good for music. Even the built-in speakers are powerful and loud enough to fill an entire room. And even have a little bit of, dare I say, bass. I mean a little bit. A little bit. But way better than average laptop speakers. The Shield feels, plays, and sounds like every bit of its currently $200 price tag. And actually, it's the price that leads me not to recommend the Shield as the #1 portable emulation device. It's relatively expensive, it's relatively heavy, it's relatively bulky. You are not going to slip it into your pocket unless you're still rocking some Jinkos. Ask your parents what Jinkos were. They're just gigantic oversized jeans. And you could fit a 2-liter bottle of Coke in the pocket. Don't ask me how I know that. That being said, if you've got the money to burn, buy it. Buy it and never ever look back. It is that good. Despite its relative weight and bulkiness, I use it every day, all day. It's full Android with the full functionality of Android. So any app that you can get in the store works perfectly on it. Netflix is great. Twitch is great. The only thing it can't do, arguably, the only thing it can't really do is make phone calls. But you can do that with Skype if you really want to, and it doesn't have a camera on it. My Android phone, my Note 3, is actually relegated now to just pretty much making phone calls. Imagine that. A phone that you use just to make phone calls. Weird. All that said, Moga, if you're listening, if you fix that D-pad, I might sell my Shield. Maybe. Probably not. But maybe. If you fix that D-pad, Moga, you will be godlike. So here we are, near the end. It's time for my recommendation. I'm not even gonna do a drum roll. Okay, screw a drum roll. Far and away, my #1 recommendation for portable emulation, all things considered, PSP. Absolutely PSP. It's powerful, cheap, has great controls, fits in your pocket, it plays beautiful looking PSP games, and most 16-bit games. Even N64 is playable on the PSP. Playable, and it really depends on the game. More specifically in my More specifically in my PSP recommendation, go for a 2000 or 3000 model. The 1000 model is a little bit more bulky, and there's considerable ghosting and blur on the screen once things get lively. It's not terrible, but it's noticeable enough for me to not prefer it. So again, my recommendation, if someone was passing me on a bicycle going the opposite way in the street and they were like, "What emulation device should I get, man?" I'd be like, "PSP, bruh!" But again, if Moga fixes that D-pad, your phone and a Moga controller would be perfect. Oh man, the Shield is so great though. Never mind. Right now, right here, today, #1 recommendation, PSP. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and if you liked it, subscribe to it. Even if you thought it was borderline acceptable, subscribe. It only takes 1 second to let me annoy you every once in a while with an email. Just a fraction of a second to click that subscribe button. If I missed anything, feel free to bring it up in the comments below. I can't possibly have an all-encompassing knowledge of everything available today. Maybe, in the time that I posted this video, a third-party Chinese device has come out that blows all emulators out of the water. So, what's your favorite portable emulator? Adios, everybody.